You're sitting on freezing marble in absolute darkness. The air smells like vinegar, human waste, and burning frankincense, mixing into something that makes your eyes water. 20 voices echo around you: senators arguing politics, merchants closing deals, philosophers debating mortality, all while their bowels empty into the void below. Then you hear it. A sound like distant thunder, echoing up from somewhere impossibly deep beneath your feet. The marble trembles. You grip the edges of the stone bench as your contribution to Rome drops, and drops, and drops, falling through darkness for what feels like forever before finally hitting water so far below you can barely hear it. Welcome to the most terrifying bathroom in human history. I'm always stunned when I see comments from Berlin, Mumbai, Sao Paulo on these videos. Drop yours below and tell me where you're watching from, because this story connects us all. This is Rome, not the romantic pizza and gelato Rome you visit on vacation. This is 150 CE Rome, a city of 1 million souls pressed together, producing 145,000 tons of human waste every single year. That's the weight of 1,000 blue whales, made entirely of poop. The smell alone should have killed the empire before the barbarians ever arrived. But somehow, Rome smelled cleaner than London would 1,700 years later. Somehow, these ancient engineers solved a problem that would baffle the modern world until the Victorian era. They built something so sophisticated, so impossibly advanced, that parts of it still function today after 2,600 years. The secret lived beneath the city's streets, in the darkness, in channels carved through volcanic rock, where water roared like underground rivers and the air itself could explode into flame. A place where officials would boat through rivers of sewage to inspect the infrastructure. A place called the Cloaca Maxima, the greatest sewer. But what happened next broke every rule they thought they knew about human waste, public health, and why some bathrooms became more dangerous than battlefields. Before dawn on a day no one recorded, someone would discover that Rome's miracle of engineering had a fatal flaw. A letter written in a mixture of ink and blood would surface 200 years later, describing what happened when the system failed. And the last person to use the imperial latrine on that day would be found 3 stories below, in a place no one should have been able to reach. Let's go back. Back before Rome became Rome, when the 7 hills were separated by malarial swamps that killed more settlers than enemy armies ever did. The mosquitoes owned this land. The water sat still, breeding disease, drowning children who wandered too close to the marsh edges. Around 600 BCE, the Etruscan kings looked at this death trap and made a decision that would echo through millennia. They would drain the swamps, channel the water, force nature to obey Roman will. They called the first channel Cloaca. Just a ditch at first, open air, hand-dug, nothing revolutionary. Workers died building it. Malaria took them. Floods swept them away. Their names weren't recorded because they were probably slaves. But here's what Amada, hydraulic engineer working on Rome's eastern quarter in 142 CE, discovered that changed everything. He was inspecting a section of the ancient cloaca that had been covered over for 400 years. The stone was Etruscan work, predating the Republic itself. He thought he understood how deep the system went. The city archives showed channels running 15 meters below street level at their deepest. Impressive, but manageable. Ahmed had brought enough rope. He didn't bring enough rope. When he dropped his weighted line into the inspection shaft, it kept going. 20 meters, 25, 30. The line went slack at 38 meters below the forum, and he could still hear water moving down there in the black. Someone had built sections of this sewer system deeper than Rome's tallest buildings were high, and nobody in 142 CE knew why. The answer was hidden in what Romans did to their own people. See, Rome wasn't just a city of marble temples and senators in togas. Most Romans lived in insolent apartment buildings that rose 6, 7, even 8 stories into the sky. Think about that. No elevators, no fire escapes. Wooden floors stacked on wooden floors, held together with hope and cheap concrete. A single oil lamp knocked over could turn an insula into a chimney, roasting hundreds alive. The poorest lived at the top, the wealthiest on the ground floor, and the toilets. The toilets were scattered on different floors, depending on who owned which section. Some on the second floor, some on the sixth. All of them dropping waste straight down through vertical shafts that connected to the cloaca system running beneath the building's foundation. In some insulae built into hillsides, that drop could be staggering. From a sixth-floor latrine on the Capitoline Hill down to the sewer channel at the base. The archaeological evidence suggests drops of 40 to 50 meters weren't just possible, they were common. But here's the part that made even hardened Roman builders nervous: methane buildup. The waste falling through those vertical shafts would rot in enclosed spaces. Methane gas would accumulate in pockets where ventilation failed. All it took was one spark from a dropped oil lamp, from someone using the latrine at night with a candle, from friction of stone on stone during an earthquake. Pliny the Younger documented at least 17 incidents of sewer fire during his lifetime. People sitting peacefully on latrines, suddenly engulfed in flames, shooting up from below. The screaming could be heard 3 blocks away. The doctor who was supposed to prevent these deaths, the imperial master of sanitation, was actually covering them up, on purpose. His name was Gaius Septimus, and he had discovered something that would have destroyed Rome's reputation. Her name was Lucia. She was 9 years old in the winter of 156 CE when it happened. We know her name because she survived to testify 43 years later when investigators finally reopened the case. Her testimony was carved into lead tablets and buried with her when she died. Archaeologists found those tablets in 1887. They sat in a Vatican archive for another century before anyone translated them fully. What Lucia described should have been impossible. She lived on the 5th floor of an insula near the Forum Boreum with her mother, her 2 younger brothers, and her father, who worked as a cloth deer. The dye turned his hands permanent purple. She remembered that detail. How his hands looked purple even when he washed them in the public fountains. Their building had a communal latrine on each floor. The 5th floor latrine served 18 families, about 90 people sharing 20 holes cut into stone benches. They used it in shifts. Morning shift, evening shift. You waited your turn. February 11th, 156 CE, evening shift. Lucia's mother took her 2 younger brothers to use the latrine while Lucia helped her father prepare dinner. The latrine was only 30 paces from their door. They'd be gone 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Lucia heard the sound first, like a god clearing his throat deep underground, rumble that made the floor vibrate. Then screaming. Not the scream of someone startled, it's a scream of someone falling. She ran. Her father ran. They reached the latrine entrance and stopped. The room was empty. All 20 toilet holes were empty. But Lucia's mother and brothers weren't there. The stone bench had collapsed into the waste shaft below, not broken, collapsed inward like something had pulled it down from beneath. When Lucia crawled to the edge and looked down, she could see them. Her mother had caught a protruding stone about 10 meters down. She was holding both boys, one in each arm. Her purple-handed father climbed down immediately. No rope, no help. Just started climbing down the interior of the waste shaft, using cracks in the ancient stone for handholds. Lucia watched him descend into darkness that smelled like death. He reached them. She heard him call up that he had them, that they were climbing back. Lucia heard her younger brother crying. She heard her mother praying to Cloaca, goddess of sewers. Then she heard the water. Not the normal trickle of wastewater. A roar like someone had opened massive floodgates upstream. The February rains had been heavy that year. The Tiber was swollen. And someone, somewhere, had released a surge of water to flush a blocked section of the cloaca. Standard maintenance procedure. Happened twice a week. The master of sanitation, was supposed to inspect all vertical shafts first. Make sure they were clear, make sure no one was inside. Gaius Septimus was supposed to do his job. The water hit them with the force of a cavalry charge. Lucia watched her family torn from the walls and swept down into darkness. She heard the sound of a wet, echoing crash as they hit the main channel for stories below. Then, nothing. Just water rushing and the sound of her own screaming. They found the bodies 3 days later, 2 miles downstream where the Cloaca Maxima emptied into the Tiber. Her father's purple hands were still clutching her youngest brother. Her mother and middle brother were never found. The Tiber had taken them. The insula owner paid Lucia's aunt 50 sestertii for her silence. The master of sanitation filed a report claiming structural failure due to poor maintenance by residents. No one was charged. No one was punished. Lucia spent the rest of her life, another 43 years, trying to get someone to listen. She testified before magistrates. She wrote letters to senators. She scratched her story onto lead tablets and buried them in her own grave, hoping future generations would know what Rome did to her family. Her final words, carved in Latin, "The greatest sewer in the world swallowed my mother. But Rome's greatest shame is that no one cared." The cover-up ran deeper than one family. When historians finally cross-referenced maintenance records from the 150 CE against burial records, they found a pattern that had been invisible for 2,000 years. 47 documented deaths in sewer-related incidents during that decade. 47 that were recorded. But burial records showed over 300 people marked as drowned in city channels or lost to flood. Someone was systematically hiding the death toll. Someone was protecting the reputation of Roman engineering at the cost of Roman lives. And that someone was Gaius Septimus, the same doctor who had been appointed to keep people safe. Why would he do it? Money. Not from covering up deaths, but from avoiding repairs. Every sewer failure he officially acknowledged meant funds diverted from his budget to fix infrastructure. Every death he could blame on resident negligence meant money he could pocket. The scheme unraveled when Septimus himself died drowning in his private latrine during a suspected methane explosion. Investigators found his personal records. Detailed notes on every incident he'd buried. Names of families he'd paid off. Calculations of money saved, and a ledger showing payments from insula owners who wanted their buildings certified as safe, regardless of actual structural condition. The latrine collapse that killed Lucia's family had been predicted 6 months earlier by another inspector. Septimus had deleted the report and taken a bribe. The scandal erupted in 159 CE Emperor Antoninus. Pius ordered complete audits of all insulae with multi-story latrines. 73 buildings were condemned immediately. Thousands of residents displaced. Entire neighborhoods redesigned with ground-level public latrines only. But the law never changed. The corruption never fully stopped. And engineers never solved the fundamental problem. How do you build a vertical waste shaft 50 meters deep without eventually killing someone? In 2003, a team of archaeologists working beneath Rome's modern subway system broke through into an undiscovered section of the ancient Cloaca Maxima. They were mapping sewer routes for the new Metro C line when ground-penetrating radar showed an anomaly. A chamber, 38 meters below current street level, sealed for at least 1,800 years based on sediment analysis. When they finally cut through the ancient Roman concrete, they found something that shouldn't exist. A vertical shaft perfectly preserved. Dry somehow isolated from the water systems around it. And at the bottom, still visible after 2 millennia, were scratched messages covering the walls. Names, dates, prayers to Cloacina. One message stopped the archaeologists cold. It's carved with what appeared to be a metal stylus in shaky but readable Latin. "Mother, if you fell, I'm sorry I couldn't hold on, Lucia." DNA analysis of organic matter trapped in cracks dated it to the mid-2nd century CE. There was other organic material there too. Analysis suggested at least 12 different individuals had left traces in that shaft over a span of 40 years. This wasn't just an abandoned sewer section. This was a tomb. A vertical grave where people fell and were never recovered. The dead still down there in the darkness beneath Rome. But here's what haunts researchers. The shaft was deliberately sealed from above. Sometime around 180 CE, someone knew people had fallen in there. Someone knew the dead were still below. And rather than recover the bodies, rather than give families closure, someone just sealed it. Covered it with new construction, built over it. Let Rome expand upward while the dead remained trapped in ancient stone, holding positions they died in, waiting for daylight that would never come. After the Lucia testimony came to light in the 200 CE, Roman law finally changed. New construction codes. Mandatory inspections every 30 days. Criminal penalties for masters of sanitation who falsified reports. Public latrines were redesigned with shorter drops, better ventilation, emergency access hatches. For about 80 years, it worked. The death toll dropped. Families like Lucia's got justice when systems failed. Rome became, briefly, what it had always claimed to be: a civilization that valued its citizens' lives. Then the empire collapsed. The aqueducts broke. The sewers filled with debris and bodies from sieges. The knowledge of how to maintain the systems vanished with the engineers who'd kept them running for 800 years. Medieval Rome, built on top of ancient Rome, had no functioning sewers at all for nearly 1,000 years. People threw waste in the streets. Used the ruins of the Forum as a public latrine. The Tiber became an open sewer that poisoned everyone downstream. The Black Death that killed a third of Europe in the 1300s spread fastest in cities with the worst sanitation. Cities that had lost Roman knowledge. When plague doctors in Florence finally studied ancient texts, trying to understand what had changed, they found plans for the Cloaca Maxima. They remembered the sound. They remembered the flowing water that had kept Rome clean. They remembered that ancient people had solved this problem completely. And they made sure the world would remember, too, that when Europe finally built modern sewers in the 1800s, engineers traveled to Rome first, studied the Cloaca Maxima, mapped the ancient channels still functioning beneath the city. But there's one more thing. Something archaeologists discovered in 2019 that changes how we see this entire story. You're back where we started. Sitting on freezing marble in a Roman latrine. 20 voices echoing around you. The smell of vinegar and frankincense and waste. But now you know why the marble trembles. Now you understand that the thunder beneath your feet isn't divine engineering, it's a grave. That the water rushing below isn't just sewage, it's evidence. Evidence of the people Rome forgot. The families sacrificed for reputation. The children who fell into darkness because someone wanted to save money. The Cloaca Maxima still stands, still functions. You can visit sections of it in Rome today. Walk through tunnels that have carried water for 2,600 years. Tourists take photos. Guides explain the genius of Roman engineering. Nobody mentions Lucia. Nobody talks about the sealed shaft beneath Metro Line C where bodies still rest in perfect darkness. Nobody wants to admit that Rome's greatest achievement was also its deepest grave. But if you visit the archaeological site at Ostia Antica, where the best-preserved ancient latrine still sits open to the sky, you can sit on those stone benches. Feel the cold marble against your skin. And if you listen carefully, if you wait until the tour groups leave and the afternoon gets quiet, you can hear it. A sound like distant thunder. Like water rushing somewhere impossibly deep below. Like the echo of someone falling, still falling, waiting for the splash that never quite comes.